In a lavish Beverly Hills mansion, while the millionaire son believes in harmony, his mother is humiliated in silence. After the kicks, an unexpected scream from inside the car trunk breaks years of submission, and what the son witnesses would change everything forever. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The house stood imposingly on Magnolia Drive, one of the most elegant streets in the Upper East Side of New York City. Its high walls, covered with imported stones that reflected the sunlight in golden hues, and ornate iron gates with bronze details, protected not only the property, but also the secrets hidden behind that flawless facade. The garden was meticulously cared for by a professional gardener who came twice a week, with rose bushes that bloomed in shades of deep red and pure white. Within those walls, however, the reality was quite different from what it appeared to be. There was a constant tension in the air, a heavy silence that hung over the spacious and luxurious rooms. The furniture was tasteful, carefully chosen by a renowned interior designer. The silk curtains swayed gently with the breeze that entered through the windows during the day. Everything seemed to be in perfect order, but there was something wrong, something that couldn't be seen at first glance, but could be felt in the heavy atmosphere of that home. Teresa had been living there for almost 3 years. She had arrived at that house with a heart full of hope, carrying only a small suitcase with her simplest clothes and a few old photographs. At 68, her body already showed the signs of time. Her white hair was always tied in a simple bun, her hands were marked by prominent veins, and her thin skin revealed every movement of her fragile bones. Her brown eyes, however, still held a spark of life, a memory of happier times. She was not a woman of many words, but she carried within her a story of sacrifice and unconditional love. Teresa had raised her son alone. Her husband, a hard-working and honest man, had passed away too soon, leaving her with a small child and a pile of bills to pay. She had no time to mourn. She worked as a seamstress, a laundress, a cook, anything that could provide for the boy. She woke up before sunrise and only rested late at night. Her calloused hands sewed dresses for parties she would never attend, washed clothes for families she would never meet. But none of that mattered. All she wanted was to see her son grow up, get an education, and have opportunities she never had. On the hardest days, when money barely covered rent and food, Teresa sold homemade sweets at the market on Sundays. Fudge, coconut macaroons, peanut brittle, all made with her own hands in the early hours from Saturday to Sunday. Robert, still a child, would help wrap each treat in colorful paper, proud to contribute in some way. His mother always said that those moments together were worth more than any money in the world. She never complained about her hard life, never showed regret. On the contrary, she always smiled at her son and said they were a team, that together they could overcome any obstacle. Teresa taught the boy values through her example: honesty, hard work, respect, humility. She said that true wealth was not in material things, but in a person's character. Robert absorbed every lesson like a sponge, observing his mother's determination, her strength in the face of adversity, her ability to find joy even in the most difficult situations. He swore to himself every night before sleeping that one day he would give his mother everything she deserved: a comfortable house, financial security, a well-deserved rest after so many years of struggle. This dream drove him in his studies, in his choices, in every step he took toward the future. And Robert grew up. He grew up strong, determined, with the same grit he had seen in his mother throughout his childhood. He attended public schools, but was always at the top of his class. He won awards, recognition, scholarships. Teresa kept every certificate, every medal, as if they were priceless treasures. When Robert got into college to study business, administration, she cried with joy. When he landed his first job at a multinational corporation, she felt that all those years of struggle had finally been worth it. Robert quickly climbed the corporate ladder. He was smart, ambitious, and knew exactly what he wanted. In a few years, he became a manager, then a director, and finally opened his own business consulting firm. Success came fast and intensely. $1 million contracts, international travel, recognition in the market. He bought the dream house, imported cars, everything he had always wanted to provide for himself. and for the mother who had sacrificed so much for him. It was around this time that Robert met Vanessa. She worked in public relations for one of his consulting firm's client companies. She was a stunning woman, with long, straight hair, always impeccably dressed in designer clothes. She had a charming smile and knew exactly how to carry herself at social events. Robert was fascinated. Vanessa seemed to be the perfect partner for someone in his position. Elegant, articulate, ambitious. They started dating, and in less than a year they were married in a lavish ceremony that graced the pages of society magazines. When Robert invited his mother to live with them in the new house, Teresa hesitated. She had spent her entire life in her simple little house in Queens, where she knew all her neighbors and felt at home. But her son insisted. He said he wanted to take care of her, to repay everything she had done. He said there was plenty of room, that she would be comfortable, that she wouldn't have to worry about anything anymore. Teresa, seeing the sparkle of happiness in her son's eyes, accepted. At first, everything seemed fine. Vanessa received her mother-in-law with polite smiles, showed her around. The house pointed out where her things were. Teresa was given a spacious room on the second floor overlooking the garden. It was a luxury she had never imagined having, but from the very first day she noticed something in her daughter-in-law's eyes. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A coldness, a distance, something that couldn't be named but could be felt. As the months went by, Robert became increasingly busy. The company was growing exponentially, and he needed to travel constantly. He would be away for weeks, closing deals in other states, sometimes in other countries. When he was in New York, he would leave early in the morning and return late at night, too exhausted to notice the subtle changes happening in his own home. That's when Vanessa began to show her true colors. At first, it was just seemingly innocent comments. "Teresa, could you tidy up the living room? The maid isn't coming today." Or, "What are you wearing? You live in an elegant house now. You need to dress better." Teresa accepted everything without complaint. She didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to cause trouble. After all, this was her son's house. His wife deserved respect, but the comments became more frequent and more acidic. Vanessa started demanding that Teresa do small chores around the house. Fold the laundry, organize the closets, clean the kitchen after dinner. At first, Teresa saw no problem with it. She had always been an active woman. She didn't like to be idle. But there was something in the way Vanessa gave the orders. It wasn't a request. It was a command. And it was always accompanied by a look of superiority, as if she were doing a favor by allowing her mother-in-law to feel useful. The maids began to notice. Maria, who had worked in the house for 2 years, saw everything but didn't know what to do. She noticed when Vanessa started treating Teresa not as the boss's mother, but as just another employee. Worse, as someone of a lower class. Maria tried to talk to Teresa once, offered to help, but the old woman just smiled sadly and said everything was fine. She didn't want to cause a fuss. She didn't want anything to reach Robert's ears and worry him. Vanessa quickly discovered she had total power over her mother-in-law. Robert trusted her completely. He believed his wife was taking good care of his mother, that the two got along well. After all, whenever he came home, everything seemed to be in perfect harmony. Vanessa knew how to put on an act. In front of her husband, she was the attentive, concerned, caring daughter-in-law. She would offer Teresa tea, ask if she was okay, comment on how wonderful it was to have Teresa living with them. But when Robert left, the mask came off. Vanessa reverted to who she really was. A woman full of bitterness, envy, and a need for control. She had never liked the idea of having her mother-in-law living there. To her, Teresa represented her husband's humble past, a past Vanessa preferred to forget. She wanted Robert to be seen only as the successful businessman, not as the son of the poor seamstress from Queens. Teresa's presence was a constant reminder of an origin Vanessa considered shameful. And there was more. Vanessa grew up in a middle-class family, but had always felt she deserved more. She married Robert not just for love, but for the life he could offer. Now that she had everything she had ever wanted, the luxurious house, the social status, the expensive clothes, She couldn't stand the idea of sharing that space with someone who, in her distorted view, didn't deserve to be there. To her, Teresa was an intruder, someone taking up space in her perfect home. The tasks imposed on the elderly woman became increasingly heavy. Vanessa began to wake her up early, even before sunrise, to prepare breakfast. Teresa would get up with difficulty, her body aching, her joints complaining with every movement. She would descend the stairs slowly, holding on to the railing, and go to the kitchen to prepare everything just as her daughter-in-law demanded. Fruits cut in a specific way, bread toasted to the exact temperature, freshly squeezed juices. If anything wasn't perfect, Vanessa would complain with disdain. "I can't believe you can't even do this right." After breakfast came other orders. Water the garden plants even under the strong midday sun, organize Vanessa's closets, folding and refolding clothes until they were just the way she wanted. Clean the expensive shoes her daughter-in-law wore, one by one, until they shone. Teresa did everything in silence, her hands trembling with exhaustion, sweat dripping down her forehead. The neighbors began to notice. The house next door was occupied by Joseph and Lucy, a retired couple who had lived in the neighborhood for over 20 years. They knew all the families on the street, knew the dramas and joys of each one. Lucy was the first to realize something was wrong. She would see Teresa in the garden, always alone, performing tasks that seemed too strenuous for her age. She also saw Vanessa watching from the window, arms crossed, with a hard expression on her face. One day, Lucy commented to her husband, "Joseph, something strange is happening at the Taylor house. That young woman doesn't treat her mother-in-law right. Have you noticed?" Joseph, a man of few words but much wisdom, just shook his head. "Better not to get involved, Lucy. It's family business." But Lucy couldn't get it out of her head. There was something in the way Teresa moved, hunched over, hurried, always afraid, that deeply bothered her. Teresa, for her part, remained silent. She didn't complain, didn't ask for help, didn't tell anyone what was happening. Every night, before sleeping, she would look at the photograph she kept on her bedside table. It was an old photo of her with Robert as a child, both smiling in front of the simple little house where they lived. She would touch the glass with her trembling fingers and whisper a silent prayer. She asked for strength to continue, not to be a burden, not to disappoint the son she loved so dearly. But deep in her heart, a feeling she tried to ignore began to grow. It was fear. Fear of Vanessa, fear of what would come next, fear that this situation would never change. And along with the fear, there was a deep sadness, a pain that went beyond her tired body. It was the pain of feeling invisible, of realizing that her presence was a nuisance, of understanding that in this home where she should have been welcomed, she was merely tolerated. Robert remained oblivious to it all. In the rare moments he was home, he would chat briefly with his mother, ask if she was well, if she needed anything. Teresa would always smile and say everything was great. She didn't want to worry him, didn't want to distract him from the work he had worked so hard to achieve. He deserved to be happy, he deserved to be successful. If she had to suffer in silence for that to happen, then so be it. Vanessa perfectly understood the game she was playing. She knew Teresa would never tell her son anything. She knew the old woman would do anything to avoid causing trouble. And that made her even crueler. The more Teresa remained silent, the more Vanessa pushed. It was as if her mother-in-law's silence was an invitation for her to go even further, to test the limits of that submission. On a Thursday afternoon, the day was particularly hot. The summer sun was beating down on New York with suffocating intensity. Vanessa was hosting friends for afternoon tea on the patio. Women as elegant as she was, always impeccably dressed, always with something to comment on about others' lives. They laughed loudly, drank chilled white wine, ate small sandwiches and fine pastries that had been ordered from an expensive bakery. Vanessa called for Teresa. "Teresa, come here." The order was sharp, authoritarian. Teresa appeared, wiping her hands on the apron she wore. "Yes?" Vanessa didn't even look at her directly. "Bring more ice and refill the drinks, and be quick, my friends are waiting." Teresa went to the kitchen, got the ice bucket and the bottles. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the weight. When she returned to the patio, she tripped lightly on the step, and a few ice cubes fell to the ground. Vanessa's friends giggled softly. One of them commented, "Wow, Vanessa, your maid is quite old." Vanessa smiled with disdain. "She's not the maid. She's my mother-in-law." The revelation caused an awkward silence. The women looked at each other, not knowing what to say. Teresa felt her face burn with shame. She bent down to pick up the ice cubes from the floor, but one of the women, seeing the scene, stood up and helped. "Let me get that, Mom." The kindness of this stranger made Teresa's eyes sting with tears she quickly suppressed. Vanessa, irritated by the interference, dismissed her mother-in-law with a wave of her hand. "You can go." Later, when the friends were leaving, one of them dared to ask Vanessa on the way to the gate, "Do you always treat your mother-in-law like that?" Vanessa shrugged. "She likes to feel useful, and besides, it's none of your business." The coldness of the reply silenced the woman, who left with an uncomfortable feeling in her chest. That night, Teresa couldn't sleep. Lying in bed in the darkness of the room that was supposed to be her refuge, she found herself questioning for the first time whether she had made the right choice in agreeing to live there. Would it have been better to stay in her simple little house? There she was poor, but she was free. There she had dignity. But then she thought of her son, of how much he had insisted, of how important it seemed for him to have her nearby, and that made her swallow her tears and try to sleep. On the other side of the wall in the master bedroom, Robert arrived from another business trip. He entered silently, so as not to wake his wife, who was already asleep. He took a quick shower and lay down, exhausted. It didn't even cross his mind to go to his mother's room to check on her. After all, in his mind, everything was fine. His mother was safe, comfortable, cared for. He had provided everything. He had no reason to worry. And so, in that elegant house on Magnolia Drive, two realities coexisted. One visible of success and harmony, the other invisible of pain and silence. And while Robert slept peacefully, believing he had built the perfect home, his mother lay awake, praying softly for the strength to face another day. The following weeks brought an even more exhausting routine for Teresa. Vanessa, realizing that no one questioned her authority in that house, became increasingly bold in her demands. What began as small household chores transformed into a regime of forced labor that consumed all of the elderly woman's energy. Waking up before 6 in the morning had become the rule. Going to bed after 11, at night too. Between those hours there was no rest. The morning always began the same way. Vanessa would come downstairs around 7:30, impeccably dressed in an imported designer workout set, her hair in a perfect ponytail, her makeup light but present. She would go straight to the private gym she had set up in one of the rooms, where she would spend an hour working out while listening to music on expensive headphones. When she finished, she expected to find breakfast completely prepared and the table set to perfection. Teresa had already learned exactly how Vanessa liked everything. The Greek yogurt had to be chilled but not frozen. The fruit had to be cut into uniform cubes, never slices. The coffee had to be hot but not boiling. The toast golden brown on both sides, with the butter already melted on top. Any deviation from this standard resulted in acidic comments and looks of contempt. One morning, Teresa made the mistake of serving the orange juice in a different glass than usual. She had broken Vanessa's favorite glass while washing it the day before, and had been terrified ever since. But she hoped her daughter-in-law wouldn't notice the replacement. She noticed. Vanessa held the glass, looked at it with disgust, and then at her mother-in-law. "What is this?" Teresa swallowed hard. "The other glass broke. I'm so sorry. I'll buy another one just like it today." Vanessa threw the glass into the sink with force, shattering it. "Try to be more careful, old woman. Everything you touch, you destroy." The words hurt more than any physical injury. Teresa lowered her head and began to pick up the shards of glass with trembling hands. One of the pieces cut her index finger, drawing blood. She pressed the wound with a dish towel and continued cleaning in silence. Vanessa watched the entire scene without showing the slightest trace of compassion or remorse. On the contrary, there was a strange glint in her eyes, as if she were satisfied with the suffering she had caused. After breakfast came the house chores. Although there was a maid hired 3 times a week, Vanessa would invent reasons for Teresa to do the heavy work on the other days. Maria only comes tomorrow, so today you need to clean the living room and vacuum the bedrooms. Or, the bedding needs to be changed. Maria doesn't do it right. It's better if you do it. Teresa went up and down the stairs countless times a day. Her knees protested with every step. Her back ached constantly, a dull pain that never completely left her. But she kept going. She carried heavy sheets, pushed the vacuum cleaner through the enormous rooms, cleaned the marble bathrooms until they sparkled. All this while Vanessa sat in the living room, flipping through fashion magazines, or talking on the phone with friends, laughing loudly about trivial matters. What hurt Teresa the most was not the work itself. She had worked hard her entire life and was not afraid of effort. What destroyed her inside was the way she was treated. It was the constant humiliation, the insults disguised as observations, the contempt that emanated from Vanessa's every gesture. It was knowing that there, in that house that should have been a home, she was seen as something disposable, insignificant, unworthy of respect. On a particularly hot afternoon in January, Vanessa called Teresa to the garage. The house had a large garage that housed 3 cars, a black sedan that Robert used for work, a white SUV that Vanessa drove, and a red sports car that Robert had recently bought as a gift to himself, a celebration for another $1 million contract closed. It was this car that Vanessa had fixed her attention on. "Teresa, look at this car." Vanessa pointed to the red sports car with an expression of disgust. "It's covered in dust. It's unbelievable that no one in this house knows how to keep things clean." Teresa looked at the car. There was, indeed, a light layer of dust on the shiny bodywork, but nothing that justified her daughter-in-law's dramatic tone. "I can call someone to wash it if you like." Vanessa gave a dry laugh. "Call someone? Waste money? You're going to wash it now." Teresa looked out of the garage. The sun was at its peak, as strong as only a New York summer can be. The temperature must have been close to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. She felt a tightness in her chest but said nothing. She just nodded and went to get the cleaning supplies, a bucket, sponge, soap, cloths, all too heavy for her weak hands. Vanessa watched her leaning against the wall, arms crossed, with that cold stare that had become so familiar. Teresa started to work. She filled the bucket with water, wet the sponge, and began to scrub the car's bodywork. The sun beat down directly on her back, burning through the thin blouse she wore. Sweat began to pour almost immediately, wetting her forehead, running down her neck, soaking her clothes. With every movement she felt her joints protest. Her arms ached from repeatedly lifting the sponge. Her back complained as she bent over the car's hood. But she continued, because she knew that stopping would mean facing Vanessa's fury. And she didn't have the strength for more humiliation that day. "How you're too slow." Vanessa's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Do you think you have all day? You need to finish this soon. You still have other things to do." Teresa tried to speed up, but her body wouldn't respond. Exhaustion was beginning to win. She felt dizzy. Her vision blurred slightly. She held onto the side of the car to keep from falling. Vanessa noticed her weakness and, instead of showing concern, felt a wave of irritation. "Don't give me any of your drama now, just finish it." Teresa took a deep breath, trying to regain her balance. She continued washing, each movement a battle against her own body. The heat was suffocating inside the garage. There was no proper ventilation, and the air felt thick, hard to breathe. That's when Vanessa approached, and with a sharp push on Teresa's shoulder, forced her to lean further over the car's hood. "Scrub properly. Look at these spots. You really can't do anything right." The brutality of the gesture made Teresa lose her balance completely. She braced herself with both hands on the car's hot bodywork, feeling the metal burn her sensitive skin. Tears began to form in the elderly woman's eyes, but she fought them back fiercely. She would not give Vanessa the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She continued scrubbing, even with her hands shaking, even with her body begging for rest. It took her almost 2 hours to finish. When she was finally done, Teresa was completely exhausted, drenched in sweat, dizzy, and with her hands red and sore. Vanessa inspected the work with critical eyes, looking for flaws. She found a few water spots that hadn't dried completely. "It's horrible, but I don't have any more patience today. You'll do it again tomorrow, and this time you'll do it right." Teresa just nodded with no strength left to even reply. She slowly went up to her room, each step a torture, and lay down on the bed without even taking off her sweat-soaked clothes. That night, Robert returned home around 10 o'clock. He was tired, but in a good mood. He had closed another important deal and wanted to celebrate. He found Vanessa in the living room watching a TV show. She smiled at him, that rehearsed smile she reserved for when her husband was present. "Hi, love, how was your day?" Robert sat next to her on the sofa and told her about the deal, excited. Vanessa listened or pretended to listen, making appropriate comments at the right times. He was happy, and that's what mattered to maintain the perfect facade. "And Mom? Is she okay?" Robert asked, suddenly remembering his mother. Vanessa didn't hesitate. "She's fine. She had dinner early and went up to rest. You know how it is, age catches up and the fatigue increases." The answer satisfied Robert. He firmly believed that his mother was well cared for, that Vanessa was attentive and kind to her. After all, his wife always appeared concerned and affectionate when he was around. There was no reason to doubt. Robert went upstairs to shower and went to sleep, with no idea that, in the next room, his mother was lying in pain, her body covered in red marks, and her soul even more bruised. The following days brought more of the same. Vanessa seemed to be testing how far she could go without being discovered, and the answer, apparently, was that there was no limit. Teresa remained silent, continued to obey, continued to suffer in silence, but something inside her was beginning to change. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A small flame of rebellion that was starting to burn, still weak, but present. Lucy, the neighbor, continued to watch. She saw Teresa in the garden, always working, always alone, always with that expression of deep sadness on her face. One day, while watering her own plants, Lucy called out over the wall, "Teresa, are you all right?" Teresa looked up, surprised. It had been weeks since anyone had asked her that with genuine interest. "I'm fine, yes, thank you." But her voice came out weak, unconvincing. Lucy noticed. "You look tired. Are you working too hard?" Teresa forced a smile. "Oh, it's just old age, nothing to worry about." Lucy wasn't convinced, but she didn't want to press. She just said, "If you need anything, just call me. I'm always here." The kindness of those words touched Teresa in a way she hadn't expected. She thanked her quietly and went back to her work, but the offer echoed in her mind. That afternoon, something happened that would change the course of events. Vanessa was expecting an important package, an order of expensive clothes she had bought online. When the delivery man rang the bell, she told Teresa to answer the door. The elderly woman carefully went down the stairs and opened the gate. The young man handed her a large, heavy box. Teresa signed for the delivery and tried to carry the box inside, but it was too heavy. Vanessa appeared at the door, impatient. "What are you waiting for? Bring it in." Teresa strained, trying to lift the box, but almost fell backward from the weight. The delivery man, who was still there, offered to help. "Let me carry that inside for you, ma'am." But Vanessa cut him off. "No. Need. She can manage." The man looked at Teresa, then at Vanessa, confused. Teresa, ashamed of the situation, made one last effort and managed to drag the box into the house. The delivery man left with a puzzled expression on his face. He would later comment to his colleagues about the strange scene he had witnessed. There was this very old lady having to carry a huge box, and the owner of the house didn't help at all. What a weird thing. These small comments began to circulate, albeit discreetly, forming a web of suspicion about what was happening in that elegant house on Magnolia Drive. Inside the house, Vanessa excitedly opened the box, revealing expensive dresses, blouses, and shoes. She tried on each piece in front of the mirror, pleased with her purchases. Teresa was sitting in the kitchen, massaging her sore back when Vanessa appeared. "Teresa, these boxes and packaging need to be taken out. Organize everything in the garage trash." There were at least 5 large cardboard boxes, plus plastic bags and tissue paper. Teresa gathered everything and began to carry it to the garage. She made several trips, going up and down the small staircase that led to the outdoor area. On the last trip, she tripped over a box that was still in the way and fell to her knees on the ground. The pain was immediate and intense. She stayed there for a few seconds, trying to catch her breath, tears finally escaping. That's how Maria the maid found her when she arrived for her workday. She rushed to Teresa and carefully helped her up. "Teresa, are you okay? What happened?" Teresa quickly wiped away her tears. "I just tripped, that's all. I'm fine." But Maria wasn't a fool. She saw the marks on the old woman's body, saw the extreme exhaustion, saw the fear in her eyes. Maria took Teresa to the kitchen and made her sit down. She prepared a glass of water and insisted that she rest. "You don't have to do all this. I'm here to work." Teresa held the young woman's hand gratefully. "You're very kind, Maria, but it's really okay." Maria wanted to insist, wanted to say that none of this was right, but at that moment, Vanessa entered the kitchen. "Maria, good, you're here. There's a lot of work today." Vanessa barely glanced at Teresa as if the fall hadn't happened. Maria felt anger rise within her, but she knew she couldn't speak up. She needed the job, she had bills to pay. But she vowed to herself that she would find a way to help Teresa, even if she didn't know how yet. The situation continued to deteriorate. Vanessa, feeling completely untouchable, became even crueler. On one occasion, she purposely threw food on the kitchen floor and ordered Teresa to clean it up immediately, on her knees, while she watched. On another, she tore up papers and scattered them around the living room just to have the satisfaction of watching her mother-in-law pick up every single piece. With each passing day, Teresa felt a little more of her dignity being stolen, but at the same time, that small flame of rebellion continued to grow. She began to wonder how much longer she could endure. She began to question whether her love for her son justified so much suffering. She began to consider, for the first time, that maybe she needed to take action. At night, when she could finally lie down, Teresa would stare at the dark ceiling of her room. Memories came in waves, one after another. She remembered when Robert was little and would wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares. She would cradle him in her arms, sing lullabies, promise she would always be there to protect him. She remembered the day he won his first scholarship, how his eyes shone with pride and determination. She remembered his college graduation, when he walked across the stage to receive his diploma and looked for her in the audience, smiling when their eyes met. All those memories were precious, kept in her heart like priceless treasures. But now, lying in that bed, in a house that didn't feel like hers, Teresa wondered if it had all been worth it. Had all that sacrifice, all that struggle been in vain? She had raised a wonderful, hard-working, successful son. But what good was it if he couldn't see her, couldn't perceive her suffering? What good was all his success if she, who had contributed so much to get him there, was being slowly destroyed? These questions tormented her, kept her awake, made her heart ache in a way no physical pain ever could. But fear was still greater than courage. The fear of disappointing Robert, of destroying his marriage, of causing trouble. The fear of being alone, of having nowhere to go. The fear that no one would believe her, that everyone would think she was exaggerating or making things up. This fear kept her trapped in that routine of abuse, in that seemingly endless cycle. Robert remained oblivious. He worked more and more, traveled more and more, immersed in his world of business and professional achievements. When he was home, he saw only what Vanessa wanted him to see, a devoted wife and a well-cared-for mother. The truth remained hidden, protected by layers of lies and appearances. But the truth, like all truths, cannot stay hidden forever. There is always a moment when it emerges, usually in an unexpected and dramatic way. And that moment was approaching, faster than anyone could imagine. The seeds of change had already been planted in the observations of the neighbors, in Maria's concern, and especially in Teresa's heart, where the flame of rebellion burned ever stronger. The elegant house on Magnolia Drive guarded its secrets carefully, but even the thickest walls eventually let out the cries of those who suffer within them. And the moment of that escape was drawing ever closer. February arrived, bringing with it the suffocating heat typical of a New York summer. Temperatures broke records, news reports warned of the risks of dehydration and heat stroke, and the streets were deserted during the hottest hours of the day. Inside the house on Magnolia Drive, the atmosphere was even heavier, not just because of the physical heat, but because of the tension that hung in the air like a dark cloud about to burst. Teresa woke up that Thursday morning with a strange feeling. Something different was pulsing in her chest, a mix of anxiety and a fragile determination she could barely name. She had slept poorly, tormented by confusing dreams where she was trapped in dark places, trying to scream but unable to make a sound. When she finally opened her eyes, the sun was already streaming forcefully through the window, indicating she had slept past her usual time. Panic immediately set in. Vanessa expected breakfast at 7:30, and it was almost 8 o'clock. Teresa got up in a hurry, ignoring the pains that protested in every joint of her body. She went down the stairs as fast as her legs would allow, holding tightly to the railing. When she reached the kitchen, she found Vanessa already sitting at the table, arms crossed, with an expression of restrained fury on her face. "So now you're giving yourself the luxury of sleeping in?" Vanessa's voice was icy, dangerous. Teresa tried to explain. "I'm sorry, I didn't hear the alarm. Vanessa slammed her hand on the table, making Teresa jump. "I don't want to hear excuses. How many times do I have to repeat that I want my breakfast on time? What do you think I am? Does a maid have the luxury of being late?" Teresa lowered her head and began to prepare breakfast, her hands trembling even more than usual. She hastily cut the fruit, nearly cutting herself with the knife. She toasted the bread, heated the milk, prepared everything with her heart racing, feeling Vanessa's eyes boring into her back. When she finally put everything on the table, her daughter-in-law didn't even look at the food. She just stood up, grabbed her purse, and left, slamming the door behind her. Teresa stood there in the middle of the kitchen, looking at the breakfast she had prepared with so much effort, which wouldn't even be eaten. She felt something break inside her at that moment. It was as if a final layer of resistance had shattered. She sat down in one of the chairs and for the first time in months allowed herself to cry openly, without suppressing the tears. She cried for the life she had had, for the son who couldn't see the truth, for the dignity that was being stolen day after day. That's how Maria found her when she arrived for another day of work. The young woman stood at the kitchen door watching the scene of pure despair. Something inside her definitively rebelled. She approached Teresa and placed a hand on her shoulder with affection. "Teresa, this can't go on. You need to tell Mr. Robert what's happening." Teresa wiped her tears with the back of her hand and shook her head. "I can't, Maria. He's so happy with his marriage, with his life. I can't destroy that." Maria sat down beside her. "But you're being destroyed. This isn't fair. Mr. Robert deserves to know the truth. He has the right to know how his own mother is being treated in her own home." Maria's words echoed in Teresa's mind all day. As she performed her tasks, as she cleaned and organized, she couldn't stop thinking. Was Maria right? Was it time to break the silence? But the fear was still there, huge and paralyzing. The fear of not being believed, the fear of causing a separation, the fear of having nowhere to go. That afternoon, something happened that would irreversibly accelerate events. Vanessa returned home, accompanied by 3 friends. They were women of her same social class, always impeccably dressed, always with that air of superiority that comes from never having had to fight for anything in life. They settled in the living room, laughing loudly, talking about their latest trips, their purchases, their insignificant problems. Vanessa called for Teresa. "Teresa, bring drinks for my friends. Fresh juice, not that boxed junk." Teresa went to the kitchen and began to prepare freshly squeezed orange juice. Her hands trembled as she held the oranges and the juicer. When she finally finished, she placed everything on a tray and carried it to the living room, walking slowly so as not to spill anything. But as she entered the living room, she tripped slightly on the rug. She managed to keep her balance, but one of the glasses wobbled and a few drops of juice fell onto the edge of the tray. Vanessa saw it, and her expression immediately hardened. "Can't you do even this right? Look at this mess." The friends looked on, embarrassed. In truth, there was no mess at all, just a few insignificant drops. But Vanessa was determined to humiliate her mother-in-law in front of her guests. "You know what? This is all wrong. Throw it out and make it again." Teresa felt her face burn. "But the juice is fine, just a few drops. Fell on the tray, I can clean it." Vanessa interrupted her in an even louder tone. "I said make it again. Are you going deaf on top of being incompetent?" One of the friends, a woman named Patricia who had more sensitivity than the others, felt extremely uncomfortable. "Vanessa, there's no need, the juice is fine like this." But Vanessa shot Patricia such a cold look that she immediately fell silent. Teresa returned to the kitchen with the tray, feeling the tears burn in her eyes again. She threw all the juice away and started all over again, each movement a torture of humiliation. When she returned with the new tray, Vanessa's friends were silent. The atmosphere in the room had completely changed. They took the glasses and thanked her in low voices, without looking directly at Teresa. The old woman left the room and went straight to her bedroom, where she locked herself in and finally let the tears fall uncontrollably. Outside the house, Lucy was watering her plants when she heard raised voices coming from the tailor's living room. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. There was anger there was cruelty. She looked at Joseph, who was reading the newspaper on the porch. "Joseph, don't you think we should do something? That lady is suffering, I'm sure of it." Joseph sighed. "Lucy, we've talked about this. It's family business. If we get involved, we could make things worse." But Lucy was no longer convinced of that. She had seen too much, heard too much. This wasn't just a family problem, it was something more serious. She decided that, at the first opportunity, she would try to speak directly with Teresa. Inside the house, Vanessa's friends left earlier than planned. The afternoon had completely lost its light-hearted mood. Patricia, the last to leave, pulled Vanessa aside in the hallway. "Vanessa, I need to tell you something. Don't you think you were a bit too harsh with your mother-in-law?" Vanessa laughed with disdain. "Harsh? I'm just teaching her to do things right. If I don't push her, she gets lazy." Patricia shook her head. "It didn't seem like pushing, it seemed like humiliation. She's Robert's mother, Vanessa. She deserves respect." Vanessa felt a wave of anger. How dare this woman judge the way she treated her own mother-in-law in her own house? "Look, Patricia, you don't know anything. You don't live here, you don't know how things are. So you'd better not give your opinion on things you don't understand." Patricia realized it was no use insisting. She said goodbye and left, but something bothered her conscience. She had known Vanessa for years and knew her friend always had a cruel streak, a need to feel superior to others. But what she had witnessed that afternoon went beyond acceptable limits. Patricia decided that if she had the opportunity to talk to Robert, she would tell him what she had seen. That night, Robert arrived, home around 10 o'clock. He was exhausted from another intense day of meetings and negotiations. Vanessa greeted him with her rehearsed smile, with dinner ready and the table set. He ate in silence, automatically answering her questions about his workday. His mind was full of numbers, contracts, deadlines. He barely noticed that his mother hadn't even come down for dinner. After the meal, Robert went straight up to his room. He passed by his mother's bedroom door and almost went in to say goodnight. But he saw the light was off. He assumed she was already asleep and didn't want to disturb her. He had no idea that on the other side of that door, Teresa was awake, lying in the dark, her body aching and her soul even more bruised, questioning for the 1,000th time whether she should tell her son the truth. The following days brought an even greater escalation in Vanessa's cruelty. It was as if she sensed she was losing control, that something was about to change, and so she needed to tighten her grip even more. The tasks imposed on Teresa became heavier, more humiliating. One morning, Vanessa demanded that her mother-in-law clean her bathroom. On her knees, scrubbing every inch of the marble floor with a small brush, Teresa obeyed, feeling her knees burn against the hard floor, tears falling silently as she worked. On another day, Vanessa deliberately threw a cup of coffee on the kitchen floor. It wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. She held the cup, looked at Teresa, and simply let it drop. The dark liquid spread across the white floor, staining everything. "Look at this mess. Clean it up now." Teresa, in shock at the gratuitous malice of the gesture, just picked up a cloth and began to clean. It was at that moment that something inside Teresa finally began to truly change. It wasn't a sudden change, but a gradual one. As she cleaned the purposely spilled coffee, as she felt her sore knees on the cold floor, she realized that this had nothing to do with her. It wasn't because she did something wrong, it wasn't because she deserved this treatment. It was simply because Vanessa was cruel, and cruel people don't need a reason to hurt. This realization was strangely liberating. Teresa stopped blaming herself. For months she had constantly questioned herself. Was she doing something wrong? Did she deserve this treatment? Was she really as incompetent as Vanessa always said? But now, kneeling on that floor, cleaning up a deliberately spilled coffee, she finally understood. The problem had never been her. The problem was, and always had been, Vanessa and her sick need to exert power over someone weaker. Teresa thought of all the women who had gone through similar situations throughout history. Women silenced, humiliated, treated as less than human by those who should have protected them. She thought of her own mother, who had suffered at the hands of cruel employers when she worked as a domestic helper. She thought of friends from her youth who endured abusive relationships because they believed they had no choice. She thought of all the voices silenced by fear, by shame, by a sense of powerlessness. And she decided she would no longer be one of those voices. No matter what it cost, she would find a way to free herself from that gilded cage. Her dignity was worth more than any material comfort. Her peace of mind was worth more than avoiding conflict. For the first time, Teresa understood that there was nothing she could do to change the situation. No matter how hard she worked, how much she obeyed, how much she kept quiet, Vanessa would never stop. The cruelty was too deeply rooted in her. And if nothing Teresa did could change that, then maybe it was time to change something else. Maybe it was time to change the situation itself. That night, Teresa couldn't sleep again. She lay in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, thinking. She thought about everything she had been through since moving into that house. She thought about the years of sacrifice raising Robert alone. She thought about how hard she had worked, fought, dreamed. And she thought about how it had all led to this moment, where she found herself trapped in a luxurious but loveless house, suffering at the hands of a woman who was supposed to be family. Dawn was approaching when Teresa finally made a decision. She didn't know how or when yet, but she knew she had to get out of there. She needed to reclaim her dignity, even if it meant being alone again. Even if it meant disappointing her son. Her life was worth more than this. Her spirit was worth more than this. And even though she was old, even though she was tired, she still deserved peace. The next morning, something would happen that would precipitate all events. Vanessa, consumed by an even greater fury, after arguing on the phone with a friend over some trivial matter, decided to take out all her anger on Teresa. She came down the stairs like a storm, her eyes shining with a malice that would frighten anyone. "Teresa, come here immediately." The tone of voice allowed no argument. Teresa appeared, still wearing the nightgown she had slept in. Vanessa pointed to the garage. "The car is dirty again, you're going to wash it. Now, and I don't care if it's hot or if you're tired, I want that car sparkling." It was noon. The sun was at its highest and hottest point of the day. The temperature must have been close to 100 degrees. Teresa looked out the window, saw the heat shimmering in the air, and for the first time thought of refusing. But the habit of obedience was still too strong. She nodded and went to change, putting on a light blouse and an old hat to protect herself from the sun. When she reached the garage with the cleaning supplies, Vanessa was already there waiting. There was something different in her eyes that day, something darker, more dangerous. Teresa began to wash the car, sweat immediately pouring down her face. Vanessa watched every movement critically, finding fault in everything. "Faster! Scrub harder! This is horrible!" The comments came non-stop, acidic and cruel. Teresa tried to speed up, but her body wouldn't respond. The dizziness returned, stronger this time. She had to lean on the car to keep from falling. Vanessa, seeing this, felt not compassion, but irritation. "Don't give me your drama. Keep going." Teresa took a deep breath, trying to regain her balance. It was then that Vanessa approached and, in a shockingly brutal gesture, grabbed Teresa's arm with force and pushed her against the side of the car. "I said keep going." The violence of the gesture was too much. Teresa felt a sharp pain in her shoulder where she had hit the car's body, but more than the physical pain, she felt something definitively break inside her. It was the last thread that still held her to that situation. She looked at Vanessa, really looked, and saw the woman for what she truly was, a being full of bitterness and emptiness, incapable of love or empathy, feeding on the pain of others to feel powerful. And Teresa realized she was no longer afraid. The fear had been replaced by something stronger: indignation, righteous anger, a deep desire for justice and liberation. She didn't know yet what she would do, but she knew something had to change, and it had to change soon. Vanessa, satisfied with her display of power, went back into the house, leaving Teresa alone in the garage. The old woman continued to wash the car mechanically, but her mind was far away. She was planning, thinking, gathering courage. The flame of rebellion that had started small was now burning fiercely, and soon, very soon, that flame would turn into a bonfire that would consume all the lies and finally reveal the truth. The dawn of the next day brought a different feeling with it. The sky was heavy with grey clouds that promised rain, and the air was thick, dense, as if nature itself sensed that something important was about to happen. Teresa woke up earlier than usual, but this time it wasn't out of obligation or fear. It was because her body simply couldn't rest anymore. There was a strange energy coursing through her veins, a mix of anxiety and determination she had never felt before. She got up slowly, each movement still painful, but there was something different about her posture. Her shoulders were no longer so hunched. Her gaze, when she faced herself in the small bedroom mirror, had a new shine. It was the shine of someone who had finally made a decision. She didn't know exactly how everything would unfold, but she knew that this day would be different. It would be the last day she would allow herself to be treated this way. She carefully descended the stairs, prepared breakfast as she always did, set everything on the table with the same usual precision. But while her hands performed the automatic movements, her mind was fully alert, observing, registering, preparing. Vanessa came down punctually at 7:30, as always, dressed in expensive workout clothes, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. She didn't even look at Teresa, just sat down and started to eat. The silence in the kitchen was heavy. Vanessa scrolled through her phone while she ate, completely oblivious to the storm brewing in the heart of the woman standing there, waiting for new orders. When she finished, Vanessa pushed her plate aside and finally looked at her mother-in-law. There was a strange glint in her eyes, something Teresa had learned to recognize. It was the harbinger of more humiliation, more cruelty. "Teresa, you're going to wash the car again today. It wasn't good enough yesterday." Teresa felt something contract inside her. The car had been washed less than 24 hours ago under the scorching sun, until she had nearly fainted. And now Vanessa wanted her to do it all over again. Not because the car was dirty, but simply because she could, because she enjoyed exercising that cruel and unnecessary power. For the first time in months, Teresa didn't answer immediately. She just looked at Vanessa, a long, steady gaze that made her daughter-in-law frown slightly. There was something different in that look. It wasn't submission. It wasn't fear. It was something Vanessa couldn't identify, and that bothered her. "Did you hear me? You're going to wash the car now." Teresa took a deep breath. She felt her heart race, felt her hands tremble, not with fear, but with adrenaline. She was on the edge of a cliff and knew that once she jumped, there would be no going back. "All right," she said, her voice coming out firmer than she expected. Vanessa seemed satisfied and left the kitchen, leaving Teresa alone with her thoughts. The elderly woman went to her room and changed her clothes. She put on a simple blouse, comfortable pants, and tied her white hair in a tight bun. As she did this, she looked around the room that had been her sanctuary for the past few years. She saw her few clothes in the closet, saw the photographs on the bedside table, saw the simple but dignified life she had tried to maintain, even in the face of so much adversity. And she knew, with absolute clarity, that she would not be returning to that room at the end of the day. Not in the same way. She descended the stairs for the last time as a broken woman. The next time she climbed them, if she ever did, it would be different. She grabbed the cleaning supplies and went to the garage. The sky was even heavier now, dark clouds, promising a storm. Vanessa was already there, waiting, with that expression of superiority and cruelty that Teresa knew so well. Teresa began to work. She filled the bucket with water, wet the sponge, and started scrubbing the car. Vanessa watched every move with critical eyes, looking for flaws, preparing to hurl more insults. The heat was suffocating even with the clouds. Sweat began to run down Teresa's face, her hands shaking with the effort. But there was something different this time. She wasn't just washing the car. She was gathering strength, collecting every piece of courage left in her being. "Faster, old woman, you're so slow." Vanessa's voice cut through the air like a blade. Teresa didn't respond, just kept working. Vanessa approached, irritated by her mother-in-law's silence. She grabbed the bucket of water and threw it at Teresa's feet with force, splashing water everywhere. "I said faster. Are you going deaf?" It was at that moment that something inside Teresa finally exploded. All those months of humiliation, all those nights crying in silence, all that swallowed and stored pain, it all came to the surface at once. She dropped the sponge, straightened up with difficulty but with determination, and looked directly into Vanessa's eyes. Enough. The word came out strong, clear, echoing through the open garage. Vanessa was paralyzed for a second, shocked. Never in all that time had Teresa opposed her. She had never raised her voice, never questioned. The surprise quickly gave way to fury. "What did you say? Are you daring to talk back to me?" Teresa felt her legs tremble, but she didn't back down. "I said enough. I'm not doing this anymore. I will not be treated this way anymore." Her voice shook, but each word was laden with a dignity that had been buried for too long and was now finally re-emerging. Vanessa took a step forward, her eyes blazing with rage. "You don't have a choice, old woman. You live in my house, eat my food, depend on me for everything." "This is not your house," Teresa replied, finding strength she didn't know she had. "This is my son's house, and I would rather live anywhere else, on the street if I have to, than continue to be your slave." The words poured out like a flood, impossible to contain now that the dam had broken. "You humiliate me every day. You treat me worse than an animal. And I kept quiet because I didn't want to cause trouble, because I didn't want to worry my son. But I can't take it anymore." Vanessa advanced on Teresa, her face contorted with hatred. She raised her hand as if to push her mother-in-law again, but this time Teresa didn't flinch. She stood firm, looking directly at the woman who had made her life a living hell. It was then that a voice came from the street. "Teresa, is everything all right over there?" It was Lucy, the neighbor, who had heard the raised voices and had approached the gate. Behind her, Joseph also appeared, concerned. The presence of the neighbors made Vanessa hesitate. She lowered her hand, but her gaze remained venomous. Teresa seized the moment. With slow but determined steps, she walked towards the gate. She passed by Vanessa, who was too shocked to react immediately. "Where do you think you're going?" Vanessa finally reacted, following Teresa. But the old woman didn't stop. She crossed the garage, passed through the outdoor area, and reached the gate where Lucy and Joseph were waiting with expressions of concern and support. "Teresa, what's happening?" Lucy asked, softly. Teresa looked at her neighbors, these people she barely knew but who showed more compassion than her own family. "I need to get out of this house," she said, her voice breaking slightly but firm in her decision. "I can't stay here anymore." Lucy immediately took Teresa's arm gently. "Come with us. You can stay at our house for as long as you need." Vanessa reached the gate, trying to maintain her composure in front of the neighbors. But the anger was evident in every line of her face. "She's not going anywhere. Teresa, get back inside now." But Teresa shook her head. For the first time in so long she was making a choice. She was choosing her dignity, her peace, her life. "I'm not going back, not while you're there." Other neighbors began to appear, drawn by the unusual commotion. Magnolia Drive, always so discreet and quiet, now had several people on the sidewalks watching the scene unfold. Vanessa realized she was losing control of the situation. Her carefully constructed reputation was beginning to crack. She tried one last gambit. "Robert is going to hear about this. He's going to be very disappointed in you." Teresa felt a pang of pain at the mention of her son's name, but she didn't waver. "Then let him know everything. Let him know how you've treated me from day one. Let him know about the humiliation, the insults, the forced labor. I'm not afraid of the truth anymore." The courage in her voice impressed even herself. Vanessa opened her mouth to reply, but no words came out. She was lost, exposed, and she knew it. It was at that exact moment that a black car turned the corner and parked in front of the house. Robert got out of the vehicle with a confused expression, trying to understand what was happening. He had returned early from his business trip because he had forgotten some important documents. He did not expect to find this scene. His mother at the gate, being supported by neighbors, his wife with a furious expression on her face, several people watching. Robert's heart pounded when he saw the scene. Something was very wrong. He knew his mother well enough to know she would never cause a scandal without a reason. Teresa was a discreet, reserved woman who always avoided conflict. Seeing her there, at the gate, clearly emotional and being supported by neighbors, set off all the alarms in his mind. He got out of the car quickly, forgetting even to turn off the engine, and strode towards the group gathered at the gate. As he approached, Robert began to notice details that had previously escaped him. His mother's excessive thinness, as if she had lost a lot of weight in a short time, the deep, dark circles under her eyes, indicating sleepless nights, the way she moved, slowly and carefully, as if every movement caused pain. And above all, the expression on her face. It wasn't just sadness, it was deep exhaustion, it was fear. It was the unmistakable mark of someone who had suffered greatly and for a long time. How had he not noticed all this before? How had he been so blind, so absent, so absorbed in his own world? "What is going on here?" Robert asked, looking from one face to another. Vanessa was the first to speak, trying to control the situation. "Robert, thank goodness you're here. Your mother is throwing a fit, saying she wants to leave. I tried to calm her down, but—" Teresa interrupted. She would not let any more lies be told. "Son, I need to talk to you." Robert looked at his mother, and for the first time, he truly saw her. He saw the extreme exhaustion on her face. He saw the marks of suffering. He saw something broken in her eyes that wasn't there before. A chill ran down his spine. "Mom, what happened?" His voice came out worried, almost scared. Teresa took a deep breath. It was time to break the silence. "Son, I can't live in this house anymore. Not while she pointed to Vanessa, treats me the way she has been." Robert frowned. "What are you talking about?" Vanessa tried to intervene again. "Robert, don't listen to her. She's confused. She's making things up." But Lucy stepped forward. "Mr. Taylor, with all due respect, but your wife is not being honest with you. My husband and I have been seeing and hearing things that have worried us greatly for months." Joseph nodded in agreement. "It's true. The way Teresa has been treated is not right. We wanted to say something sooner, but we didn't know if we should get involved." Other neighbors began to chime in, some reporting things they had seen, shouts they had heard, the way they saw Teresa always working exhaustively in the garden under the hot sun, always alone, always with that look of deep sadness. Robert was pale. He looked at Vanessa, searching for a denial, an explanation. But her face was rigid, her lips pressed into a thin line. She knew she had been discovered. Robert turned back to his mother. "Mom, please, tell me what's happening, the truth." And Teresa told him. There, at the gate of the house, in front of the neighbors, in front of the daughter-in-law, who had terrorized her, she told him everything. She spoke of the humiliating tasks, the constant insults, the forced labor, the threats, the loneliness, the fear. Every word was laden with months of repressed pain. Robert listened in silence, his face growing paler, his hands clenching into fists. When Teresa finished, tears were streaming down her face, but there was also a sense of liberation. Robert turned slowly to Vanessa. His look was that of someone who had just woken from a dream to find they were living in a nightmare. "Is it true?" His voice was low, controlled, but there was a deep anger behind it. Vanessa tried to deny it, but the words died in her throat. There were too many witnesses, too much evidence. "Robert, you don't understand. Is it true?" he repeated, louder this time. Vanessa realized there was no escape. She shrugged, a last attempt to appear indifferent. "I was just trying to make her feel useful. She was living here for free. It was only fair that she helped with a few things." The coldness of the answer shocked even Robert. He looked at the woman he had married and realized he had never truly known her. "A few things?" he repeated, his voice trembling with contained emotion. "You humiliated my mother. You turned her life into a living hell. In my house, under my roof." He turned to Teresa, who was being supported by Lucy. "Mum, forgive me. Forgive me for not seeing. Forgive me for being so blind, so absent. Forgive me for letting this happen." Teresa saw the genuine suffering in her son's eyes, and her heart ached. "Son, you didn't know. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to worry you. I didn't want to destroy your marriage." Robert shook his head, tears now streaming down his face as well. "My marriage?" He gave a bitter laugh. "What marriage? I married a person who doesn't exist. The real woman is the one who tortured my mother and feels not an ounce of remorse." He approached his mother, and with all the care in the world held her hands. "You're not going anywhere. This is your house. It always has been and always will be. The one who is leaving," he looked at Vanessa with hardness, "is her." Vanessa took a step back, finally understanding the gravity of the situation. "Robert, you can't do this. We're married." "For now," he replied coldly. "But that's going to change. You can be sure of that." He turned his full attention back to his mother. "Mom, come inside with me. Let's talk. We'll sort everything out. I promise that no one will ever hurt you again. Never again." Teresa looked at her son, saw the genuine love in his eyes, saw the regret, saw the sincere desire to fix things, and something inside her began to heal. Lucy gently released Teresa's arm. "Go with your son, dear, but know that our door is always open if you need it." Teresa thanked her with a nod, deeply touched by the kindness of this woman she barely knew. Robert helped his mother into the house, passing by Vanessa without even looking at her. The neighbors began to disperse, but the conversations would continue for days about what had happened that morning at the Taylor house. Inside the house, Robert led his mother to the living room and helped her sit on the most comfortable sofa. He knelt in front of her, holding her hands carefully as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Tell me everything again, Mom, from the beginning. I need to know everything." And Teresa told him again, in more detail this time, every episode of cruelty, every harsh word, every impossible task. Robert listened with a broken heart. Each revelation was a stab. He had worked so hard to give his mother a good life, to repay everything she had done for him, and in the end, he had only put her in a worse situation. The guilt was overwhelming. But along with the guilt came determination. He was going to fix this, no matter what it cost. He was going to ensure his mother had the peace and dignity she had always deserved. Vanessa had disappeared to the bedroom. Robert didn't even care. He knew he would have to deal with her eventually. But right now, his priority was his mother. He apologized repeatedly, promised that everything would be different, assured her that she would be safe. Teresa listened, still processing everything that had happened. She had broken the silence. She had found her voice, and her son had finally seen the truth. In the following weeks, a lot changed in that house on Magnolia Drive. Vanessa left, taking only her clothes and personal belongings. Robert began the separation process, determined to never have any connection with that woman again. The house, once filled with tension and fear, began to breathe again. Robert drastically reduced his work travel, delegated more responsibilities at the company, and decided that no business was worth more than being present for those who truly mattered. Teresa began a slow process of healing. The physical wounds healed over time, but the emotional ones took longer. There were nights of nightmares, days of deep sadness, moments when the memory of the humiliations came back with force. But Robert was always there, patient, loving, doing everything in his power to help his mother regain her dignity and peace of mind. Lucy and Joseph became close friends. They visited Teresa regularly, had tea together, talked about life. The house that was once a prison finally became a real home, a place where Teresa was treated with the respect and love she always deserved. She started smiling again, slowly but genuinely. The sparkle returned to her eyes. She began to live again, not just survive. Months later, on a quiet afternoon, Teresa was sitting in the garden she had cared for under such terrible conditions. But now it was different. Now she was there because she wanted to be, because she liked the flowers, because she appreciated the gentle afternoon sun. Robert came out of the house carrying 2 glasses of iced lemonade. He sat next to his mother, and they were silent for a moment, just enjoying the peace. "Mum, I'll never completely forgive myself for what happened," Robert said quietly. Teresa took her son's hand. "Son, you don't need to carry that guilt. You didn't know. And when you found out, you did the right thing. That's what matters." Robert looked at his mother with teary eyes. "You are the strongest person I know. After everything you've been through, you still have compassion in your heart." Teresa smiled. "I learned that holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I chose to free myself from that. I chose to live in peace." Robert hugged his mother carefully, feeling an immense gratitude for still having her there, for having had the chance to fix things before it was too late. "I love you, Mom, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it." The sun began to set on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In the elegant house on Magnolia Drive, there was finally peace. There was true love. There was dignity. Teresa looked at that beautiful sky and felt, for the first time in a long time, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not as a prisoner, not as a servant, but as a loved, respected, and cared for mother. She had survived the storm, and now, finally, she could enjoy the calm that came after. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Teresa and Robert has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of suffering, courage, and redemption, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what marked you the most. Teresa taught us that it's never too late to reclaim our dignity, that silence can protect those we love, but can also destroy us, and that the truth, no matter how painful, always needs to be told. Every day, we bring intense stories like this one, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul, which show the invisible struggles that so many people face in silence. If you know someone who is going through a difficult situation, be the voice that encourages that person to seek help. Be the Lucy in someone's life. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode, with another story that will stir your emotions and make you reflect on what truly matters in life.